World War II was not only a battle of armies, but a war against culture itself. As Nazi forces marched across Europe, they carried weapons in one hand and lists in the other. These lists named paintings, sculptures, books, and sacred objects worth millions. Adolf Hitler believed art defined power. He wanted to erase cultures he despised and display their treasures as trophies of a new empire. What followed became the largest art theft in human history. From Paris to Warsaw, Jewish families were forced from their homes. Behind them, Nazi officers entered quietly, selecting masterpieces from walls and vaults. Paintings by Rembrandt, Picasso, Monet, and Van Gogh were seized without payment. Museums were emptied. Private collections vanished overnight. Even children's drawings and religious heirlooms were taken, packed into crates, and shipped east under military guard. By the end of the war, historians estimate over 600,000 artworks were stolen. The theft was organized and ruthless. Special units like the Einsatzstab Reichsleiter Rosenberg, known as the were created solely to confiscate cultural property. Each piece was photographed, labeled, and recorded. Some art was reserved for Hitler's plan. Führer Museum, and works were sold to fund the Nazi war machine. Anything considered degenerate was burned or destroyed. Culture itself became a battlefield. As bombs fell and cities burned, stolen art was hidden deep underground. Salt mines, castles, and mountain tunnels became secret vaults. One of the most famous discoveries came in 1945, when Allied forces entered the Altau Sea salt mine in Austria. Inside, they found thousands of stolen masterpieces stacked like cargo. These discoveries shocked the world and revealed the true scale of Nazi cultural crimes. After the war, the Allies faced a new mission. The Monuments, Fine Arts, and Archives program, later known as the Monuments Men, worked to recover stolen art. They raced against time, chaos, and black markets. Many pieces were returned, but countless others disappeared into private collections, galleries, and museums across the world. Some families never even knew what was taken from them. Today, nearly 80 years later, the story is not over. Lost art still resurfaces in attics, auction houses, and museum walls. Each discovery reopens old wounds and raises hard questions about justice, ownership, and memory. This is the story of art looted in war and found in peace, and why the past still demands answers today. When the guns fell silent in 1945, Europe lay in ruins, but another battle had just begun. Across the continent, stolen art was scattered, undocumented, and vulnerable. Millions of refugees were moving, borders were shifting, and black markets thrived in the chaos. Paintings once displayed in grand homes were now traded like currency. For many families, their cultural identity had been erased along with their loved ones. The Allied forces understood the danger. That is why the Monuments, Fine Arts, and Archives officers expanded their mission. These men and women were not soldiers by trade. They were museum curators, historians, architects, and artists. Armed with little more than notebooks and determination, they searched abandoned castles, bombed out churches, and underground bunkers. Every recovered artwork was a race against looters, smugglers, and time itself. Yet recovery was never simple. Many Nazi records were destroyed. Others were deliberately falsified. Art dealers sympathetic to the regime had stolen works. Behind fake ownership histories, museums sometimes accepted these pieces without asking difficult questions. In some cases, stolen art was quietly returned to governments instead of the original families, leaving survivors invisible once again. Justice, like the art itself, was often misplaced. By the 1950s, public attention shifted away from restitution. The Cold War dominated headlines, and unresolved claims were ignored. Survivors aged, passed away, or lacked proof to fight wealthy collectors. Stolen art became normalized inside respected institutions. For decades, silence protected those who benefited from the theft. The wounds of war remain open, but unseen. Everything began to change in the 1990 seconds, newly opened archives in Eastern Europe revealed shocking documentation. Journalists uncovered museum collections with Nazi-era gaps in ownership. In 1998, the Washington Conference on Holocaust-era assets pushed governments and museums to confront the truth. Provenance research became a moral obligation, not an option. For the first time, restitution was treated as justice, not charity. Families started coming forward with photographs, letters, and faded inventory lists. Some cases took years, even decades. Others ended in quiet settlements. Each return carried emotional weight. A painting was never just a painting. It was a memory of a home, a voice stolen by violence, a fragment of identity restored. Modern restitution is not about revenge. It is about acknowledgement. It asks institutions to admit uncomfortable histories and correct them publicly. As long as stolen art hangs on walls without truth, the war has not truly ended. The search continues because history does not forget what was taken, and neither should we. By the early 21st century, the hunt for Nazi-looted art had entered a new phase. The battlefield was no longer ruined cities, but courtrooms, archives, and museum storage rooms. Technology transformed restitution. Old shipping lists were digitized. Wartime photographs were enhanced. Databases connected fragments of lost histories across continents. What once required luck now demanded proof. Museums in the United States and Canada faced growing pressure. Many had acquired European art during the post-war years, often in good faith, but without full knowledge of its origins. As researchers traced ownership gaps between 1933 and 1945, uncomfortable truths emerged. Some masterpieces on public display had been taken from families who never survived the Holocaust. Silence was no longer acceptable. High-profile cases captured public attention. Paintings by Klimt, Schiele, and Pissarro became symbols of delayed justice. Lawsuits forced institutions to choose between legal defense and moral responsibility. In several cases, museums agreed to return works or reach settlements with heirs. Each decision sent a message. History could not be erased by time or prestige. Restitution, however, remains uneven. Legal systems differ. Statutes of limitation protect some holders. Proving ownership is difficult when entire families were destroyed. Heirs must rely on fragments, a black and white photo on a wall, a receipt hidden in a book, a memory passed down through generations. The burden of proof still falls on those who lost everything. Canada has taken steps toward transparency, encouraging museums to review collections and publish provenance records. In the United States, federal guidelines support claims, but outcomes vary by state. Private collectors often remain hidden behind confidentiality. The art world still struggles with accountability. Justice moves slowly, but it moves. What makes modern restitution powerful is its human impact. When a painting is returned, it does not erase loss, but it restores truth. Families stand before objects once stolen from their grandparents. Museums rewrite labels. History is corrected in public view. These moments remind us that art carries memory, and memory carries responsibility. The story of Nazi-looted art is not only about the past. It is a warning. War does not end when treaties are signed. Its consequences hang on walls, sit in vaults, and wait to be confronted. Peace is not just the absence of violence. It is the courage to return what was taken and to tell the full story, no matter how long it takes. Not every story of Nazi-looted art ends with a courtroom victory. Many end in silence, frustration, or compromise. As restitution efforts expanded, resistance also grew. Some museums argued they were legal owners. Others feared setting precedents that could empty entire galleries. Governments worried about political backlash. Behind closed doors, negotiations became slow and painful. Justice often depended on persistence, not fairness. One of the greatest obstacles is time. Witnesses are gone. Records are incomplete. Entire family lines were erased during the Holocaust. Heirs today may live in different countries, unaware that a stolen painting even exists. When claims finally surface, institutions sometimes demand impossible levels of proof. the absence of evidence becomes evidence against the victims. Another challenge lies in the art market itself. Private sales are discreet by design. Provenance gaps are hidden behind confidentiality agreements. Auction houses may list ownership. Histories that begin conveniently after 1945. Once a painting enters a private collection, it can disappear for decades. Each hidden work delays truth and denies closure. Despite these barriers, progress continues. Some museums in the United States and Canada have chosen transparency over protection. They publish full provenance records online. They invite independent researchers. They publicly acknowledge past mistakes. These actions do not weaken institutions. They strengthen trust. When museums confront history honestly, they become places of memory, not just display. Education has become a powerful tool. Universities now train specialists in provenance research. Students learn that art history includes theft, survival, and restitution. Public exhibitions focus on the stories behind the frames, not just the images themselves. Audiences begin to understand that cultural objects are not neutral. They are witnesses. Survivors and their descendants continue the fight, not for profit, but for recognition. Many choose to loan returned artworks back to museums. Others donate them. The goal is not removal, but truth. A label that tells the full story matters more than ownership alone. Memory, once restored, belongs to everyone. The legacy of Nazi art theft forces a moral question on the modern world. Restitution does not rewrite history. What does it mean to benefit from injustice committed before we were born? Each returned artwork is a quiet act of resistance against forgetting. And as long as stolen art remains unacknowledged, the work of peace is unfinished. It corrects it. In recent years, discoveries of Nazi-looted art have come from the most unexpected places. Paintings have been found behind false walls, in dusty attics, and inside forgotten bank vaults. Each discovery makes international headlines, not because of the artwork's price, but because of what it represents. A voice from the past breaking through decades of silence. One of the most striking modern cases involved a private collection hidden for generations. When authorities finally revealed it, hundreds of works were traced back to Jewish families persecuted during World War II. The shock was not only the scale of the theft, but how easily history had been buried in plain sight. These moments force societies to ask how much remains undiscovered. Technology now plays a critical role. Artificial intelligence compares old photographs with modern images. Databases connect museum records across borders. Lost works are identified faster than ever before. What once took decades can now happen in months. Still, technology cannot replace moral choice. Institutions must decide whether to act once the truth is known. Public pressure has become a turning point. In the United States and Canada, media investigations and survivor testimonies have changed public opinion. Museums understand that secrecy damages credibility. Transparency builds trust. Each restitution case sets a standard for the next. The art world, once protected by silence, is slowly being reshaped by accountability. For families, the return of a stolen artwork is deeply personal. It is not about reclaiming wealth. It is about restoring a piece of a life interrupted by violence. Some heirs describe the moment as meeting a lost relative. Others feel grief mixed with relief. The artwork becomes a bridge between generations that never met. Restitution also carries a message for the future. War continues to threaten culture around the world. The lessons of World War II remind us that protecting art is protecting identity. When cultural theft is ignored, injustice is prolonged. When it is confronted, history becomes a guide, not a burden. The story of Nazi-looted art proves that peace is not passive. It requires action, honesty, and remembrance. Each recovered paint, each corrected label, each public acknowledgement brings the world closer to closure. The war may be long over, but its echoes remain. And in returning what was stolen, humanity reclaims not just art, but dignity itself. As restitution cases increase, a deeper debate has emerged about responsibility. Who should take the first step? Governments, museums, or private collectors? For decades, Many waited for victims' families to come forward. Today, that expectation is changing. Ethical responsibility is shifting toward those who hold the art possession without truth is no longer considered neutral. In the United States, new policies encourage proactive provenance research. Museums are expected to examine works acquired during and after World War II and publicly disclose gaps in ownership. This shift reflects a broader understanding. Institutions are not just caretakers of objects, but guardians of history. When museums lead restitution efforts, they redefine their role in society. Canada has followed a similar path, promoting transparency and cooperation with international databases. Cross-border collaboration has become essential, as stolen art often moved through multiple countries before settling. In North America, each recovered trail reveals how global the Nazi art theft network truly was. It also shows how interconnected justice must be. Yet not all cases end in return. Some are resolved through shared custody, long-term loans, or financial settlements. While imperfect, these solutions acknowledge wrongdoing and restore visibility to lost histories. The most important outcome is recognition. When museums publicly state that an artwork was stolen during the Holocaust, silence is broken, memory is restored. Critics argue that restitution threatens cultural access. They fear empty walls and lost masterpieces. But history shows the opposite. Many heirs choose to keep artworks on public display. What changes is the story told beside them. Labels include names, dates, and theft histories. Art becomes education. Museums become spaces of truth, not avoidance. The impact reaches beyond galleries. Restitution influences how future conflicts are judged. International law increasingly recognizes cultural theft as a war crime, not collateral damage. The legacy of World War II has shaped these standards. Each successful restitution reinforces the idea that cultural crimes have consequences, even generations later. At its core, restitution is about dignity. It affirms that victims of the Holocaust were not erased, even when their homes, families, and possessions were destroyed. Returning art cannot undo genocide, but it can reject the ideology that enabled it. It declares that stolen identity will not be permanently claimed by those who benefited from violence. The search for Nazi-looted art continues, not because the past refuses to stay buried, but because truth demands recognition. Peace is not complete until history is faced honestly, and as long as stolen art remains unresolved, the moral work of World War II remains unfinished. Behind every restitution case is a personal story that rarely makes headlines. Legal documents speak in dates and inventory numbers, but families remember voices, rooms, and moments. A painting might appear in a faded photograph from a birthday or a holiday gathering. These memories become evidence, carrying emotional weight far beyond any courtroom argument. For many descendants, the search begins by accident. A museum visit, a news article, an online database entry that looks familiar. What follows is often years of research, travel, and correspondence. They must prove not only ownership, but loss. The burden is heavy, especially when confronting powerful institutions with legal teams and public reputations to protect. Emotional costs are rarely discussed. Each claim reopens trauma passed down through generations. Survivors' children and grandchildren relive stories of flight, hiding, and disappearance. Restitution becomes a form of historical recovery, not just legal action. It asks families to revisit wounds that never fully healed. Some museums have learned to approach these cases with empathy. They provide access to archives, share research, and engage in dialogue. These moments mark a shift from confrontation to cooperation. When institutions listen, restitution becomes a shared act of remembrance rather than a forced correction. There are also stories of resistance, families ignored, claims delayed for decades, legal tactics used to exhaust heirs financially and emotionally. These cases remind us that justice is not automatic. It requires moral courage. Every unresolved artwork represents a story still waiting to be acknowledged. In the United States and Canada, public awareness has changed expectations. Audiences now ask where art comes from, not just how it looks. Museums are judged not only by their collections, but by their honesty. Transparency has become part of cultural leadership. Restitution does not end when an artwork changes hands. Many families choose to share their stories publicly. They speak at museums, schools, and conferences. Art becomes a doorway to Holocaust education. Memory moves from private pain to public understanding. These human stories explain why restitution matters. It is not about correcting museum catalogs. It is about restoring names erased by violence. When an artwork returns to a family, even briefly, it reconnects generations separated by war. In that moment, history breathes again, and the promise of never again gains meaning beyond words. As the number of restitution cases grows, the global conversation around Nazi-looted art continues to evolve. What began as isolated claims has become an international movement demanding accountability. Governments, museums, and cultural institutions are now expected to respond, not react. The question is no longer whether restitution matters, but how far responsibility should reach. International cooperation has proven essential. Stolen artworks often crossed multiple borders before reaching North America. Databases shared between Europe, the United States, and Canada now allow researchers to track ownership histories with greater accuracy. This collaboration reflects a shared understanding. Cultural justice cannot be confined by national boundaries. Laws, however, remain inconsistent. Some countries prioritize moral claims over legal technicalities. Others strictly enforce statutes of limitation. This imbalance creates unequal outcomes. A family may succeed in one jurisdiction and fail in another with identical evidence. These contradictions highlight the need for clearer international standards. Despite legal complexity, public expectations have shifted. Museums that resist restitution face reputational damage. Audiences increasingly value ethical leadership over possession. Transparency reports, public disclosures, and open archives are becoming the norm. Silence is no longer neutral. It is a choice, and one that carries consequences. Restitution also challenges how history is presented. Museums are moving away from celebratory narratives toward honest storytelling. Exhibits now include theft histories, wartime losses, and survivor voices. Art is no longer isolated from context. It is framed within human experience. Critical restitution is influencing future policy. Cultural protection has become part of international humanitarian law discussions. The lessons of World War II guide responses to modern conflicts where art and heritage remain targets. The past informs prevention. Memory shapes action. For younger generations, these stories define how history is inherited. They learn that justice can be delayed, but not dismissed. Restitution teaches that accountability does not expire with time. Cultural institutions become classrooms where ethics are taught through example. The movement to recover Nazi-looted art is not about rewriting the past. It is about completing it. Each resolved case adds clarity to a history once distorted by violence and theft. The work is ongoing, but its direction is clear. Peace requires more than silence. It requires truth, responsibility, and the courage to return what was taken. As time moves forward, the urgency of restitution grows stronger. Each year, more first-hand witnesses are lost, and with them, memories that can never be replaced. What remains are documents, photographs, and the responsibility of later generations to act. Restitution has become a race against forgetting. The longer the delay, the greater the risk that stolen history will fade into permanence. Museums now face a defining choice. They can remain passive holders of disputed works, or active participants in historical correction. Those that choose action are reshaping public trust. By acknowledging past wrongs openly, they demonstrate that integrity matters more than possession. This shift reflects a broader cultural change, especially in the United States and Canada, where institutions are increasingly judged by ethical standards. Private collectors represent one of the final frontiers. Unlike public museums, they operate largely beyond scrutiny. Many inherited artworks without knowing their origins. Others prefer not to know. When stolen art remains hidden in private homes, restitution becomes nearly impossible. Calls for voluntary disclosure continue to grow, but enforcement remains limited. The question of accountability still lingers. The media plays a powerful role in this process. Investigative reporting has exposed hidden collections and forced institutions to respond. Public storytelling transforms individual claims into shared history. Each published case educates millions and pressures decision-makers to act responsibly. Awareness turns memory into momentum. Restitution also affects how nations remember. World War II. It shifts focus from victory alone to consequence and responsibility. The war is no longer seen only through battles and treaties, but through personal loss carried across generations. Art becomes evidence, not decoration. For families, time is precious. Many heirs pursue claims knowing they may never see the outcome themselves. They continue for their children and for those who never return. Each effort affirms that loss will not be ignored, even when justice arrives late. Ultimately, restitution is about moral clarity. It asks whether societies are willing to confront uncomfortable truths. Returning stolen art does not diminish cultural heritage. It strengthens it by restoring honesty. History becomes more complete, not less. As the search continues, one truth remains clear. Peace is not defined by the absence of war, but by the presence of justice. The recovery of Nazi-looted art proves that accountability can survive decades of silence. What was stolen in violence can still be returned in dignity, and in doing so, the past finally begins to rest. The story of Nazi-looted art is ultimately a story about memory. It reminds us that war does not end when fighting stops. Its consequences travel through time, carried by objects, records, and unanswered questions. Every stolen painting holds a history of loss, and every act of restitution is a decision to remember rather than forget. For the United States and Canada, this history carries special responsibility. Many stolen works found safety and recognition in North American collections. With that privilege comes accountability. Museums, collectors, and governments now understand that preserving art also means preserving truth. Cultural leadership is measured not by what is owned, but by what is acknowledged. Restitution is not perfect, and it never will be. Some artworks will never be found. Some families will never receive answers. But progress is measured in intention as much as outcome. Each open archive, each corrected label, each returned object weakens the legacy of theft. Justice may arrive late, but it still matters. Education ensures this work continues. When audiences learn the full stories behind museum walls, they become guardians of memory. Young generations grow up knowing that culture can be stolen, and that silence allows injustice to survive. Knowledge transforms viewers into witnesses. The legacy of World War II teaches a lasting lesson. Cultural destruction is not collateral damage. It is a deliberate attack on identity. By restoring stolen art, societies reject the ideology that justified its theft. They affirm that human dignity cannot be permanently erased. Peace, in this context, is active. It demands responsibility, empathy, and courage. Returning stolen art does not change the past, but it changes how the past is carried forward. It honors those who were silenced and restores their place in history. As long as one stolen artwork remains hidden, the work is unfinished. But with every discovery, every restitution, the world moves closer to moral closure. Looted in war, found in peace. These objects stand as proof that justice can outlast violence. And in remembering what was taken, humanity remembers who it must never become again.